Good evening, everyone. We're glad that you are joining us on the other side of the screen this evening for the story, because as you know, it's all about the story. You are absolutely right. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is a little different tonight just because of some of the COVID restrictions. We find ourselves pretty much with an empty sanctuary tonight, but we know that a lot of you are joining us, so we're glad that you can be a part of it. We have a great story tonight. You know, I was looking back over the last 8 weeks. Tonight's the last night of this particular series, but we began with Sean Gordon. Then we went with Dee Williamson. Sean Gordon, as you know, had an incredible story of life in prison and how someone gave a Bible to him, and all of a sudden his life turned upside down, and how God has used him. He's now in Wichita as a chef. Dee Williamson, a district superintendent up in the Salina, Wichita, or Hutchinson area. Wendy Moeller-Seib, who shared with us doing ministry with the Summit down at Southwestern College. Emmanuel Affel, who's a pastor on the east side of town coming from Ghana, Africa, sharing his story and how God works in Africa and in the States here. Nancy Tanton, one of our own, who has shared with us, and we learned a lot more about her, didn't we? What a great time with Nancy Tanton. And then we had a couple folks that Mary Lou and I know pretty well, Molly Just, followed by Todd Just last week, and their own stories that they've been able to share. Molly down at Southwestern as the campus minister as well as the director of discipleship, and then Todd as the executive pastor and worship pastor at Bennington Bible Church. And so, wow, it has been awesome. The response that we've had from all of you has been incredible. So just hear this. We're going to continue to do some of these kind of things. Stay tuned about when and how and all those kind of things. In fact, I want to tease you just a little bit. Sunday morning, we may have just a little bit of mini story within our worship time together. So you all come. That's 10:30 Sunday. One other thing before we get started with our special guest tonight. Tomorrow, Wendy Homan and Sarah Brooks, who are part of our staff, they are actually going to be back in base camp, where is our coffee shop, and we have a bunch of Christmas items there, ornaments and other things for sale. They are going to do the Asbury Shopping Network, just like QVC on TV. It's going to be on Facebook Live. Originally scheduled for 10, they're going to move it to 11:30 because there's a women's Bible study that meets online, and so they're going to move it to 11:30. Join in. It is going to be a hoot with those two. And, all the missions, all the money goes for missions and so forth. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We hope you can join us. Facebook Live, 11 o'clock tomorrow. 11:30 tomorrow. 11:30. Okay? So, should be a great time. Now, our special guest tonight, been a friend of mine for a long time. We've been walking alongside each other in ministry for a long time, from the Kansas West days now to Great Plains days and everything that goes along with it. We have a great pastor who pastors down at Norwich and then in the Delano district with New Covenant, doing incredible things. We're doing some things working with her. And so Cathy Holley is here. So you on the other side, give it up for Cathy Holley. And even if you would be here. Here we go, because we do have a few staff folks here. So, well, hello, Cathy.
Hello.
Just like our own little TV show.
Yes, I like it.
Yeah, isn't this fun?
This
we're
is
going to
good.
make sure we have our mics all up.
Okay, I have my mic.
Yeah,
and
so
got
good.
everything I need.
It's good to see you. Yeah,
it's good to be here.
Yeah, we just had a meal. Mary Lou and I and Cathy had a little meal together earlier. We ordered. Don't worry, we did the safe thing. We ordered out and we brought it in back to the library, and then Susan joined us a little bit later, and so we've had a good time already, and
yes.
So glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
Man.
This is like old home.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
it is, and we'll talk
is.
about that a little bit. But today, the last few months, maybe all of ministerial life has been crazy. Little nuts today?
A little crazy, yeah.
Little crazy?
A little crazy today, this week, last week.
Yeah. Just trying to sort all this stuff out.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that we're going to get to after a bit is, Cathy, why in the world would you want to be in ministry? But let's hold on to that for a second. But
yes.
My goodness, there's a lot of questions that go with that. But you're not a native Kansan.
I'm not.
So where do you come from?
I grew up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Dakota.
And I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, actually, in the Air Force base. My father was in the Air Force, but I grew up and graduated from Lincoln High School in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Sioux Falls.
Yep.
Yep. And we were talking before because she knows I like to hunt, and the pheasant capital of the world, pheasant hunting capital of the world. So,
Yep, about 90 miles just west of Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, in fact, I think our own Gordon McClure, who used to be here, now at Abilene, used to go up there and go hunting.
Up to Mitchell, South Dakota. Go hunting. Yep.
So, So we have some connections.
Yeah.
with South Dakota.
South Dakota.
Dakota. So you went to school there. You didn't go. Did you go to college there at all a little bit or not? I'm trying to remember.
Actually, I did. When I was 20, I'm trying to get all these dates straight.
Sure.
When I was 23, I went back to college in Brookings, South Dakota, to South Dakota State University, and took a year of college there, and then moved to Wichita.
Moved to Wichita. What year did you move to Wichita?
1984.
1984.
Mm-hmm.
1984.
Yep.
So,
1984.
What brought you to Wichita?
Well, that's a long story.
We don't have to have it all.
Yeah,
but,
basically, following some job situations with the person I was married to at that time, and yeah.
Yep.
So we came down here, and within like 9 months, I was on my own.
Yep.
And
all of a sudden, you were single.
I was single, and
Yep.
yeah, started to work at direct mail printers in the fall of '84, and I worked there for about 13 years. Met my husband there,
Yeah.
who is now the owner of direct mail printers. So
His name is Neil.
His name is Neil Holley, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it was kind of a crazy time.
Yeah.
Back in the mid '80s.
Well, I remember early on when we were in, and we'll get to this, but when we were doing some of the renewal stuff together, you would print our newsletters.
Yeah, I
through
think
your
I did.
through
Yeah,
your husband's company, through your company that you were working at.
Yeah.
So yeah, things have changed a little bit where now you can just kind of spit them out on the computer, but
Yeah.
we had you do a bunch of that for us.
I still do a lot of that. I do all the design and graphics and stuff at my church, and
Yep.
because
Yep. So you have a plethora of talents.
yes, I do.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess you could look at it.
Would that be right?
Sometimes I forget that, I'll even say, well, down at the shop, and it's the church,
That's what it is.
At the shop today, I did
the
this.
church. We're going down to the shop, honey. Gonna go do a little work down to the shop.
That's right. So anyway.
Yeah. So as you think back to your growing up years, here we are in this church sanctuary. You and I are both pastors at this point, and so forth. But you didn't grow up that way. I mean,
No.
there was your church history. Share with us what you would like.
Well, when I was a child, my parents never attended church on a regular basis at all. My mother was actually from a family where one parent was Baptist and one parent was Catholic, and I think they
That's an
split the
interesting
kids
mix.
up.
Yeah.
So that was kind of weird, and she fell on the Baptist side, and my dad had some sort of Lutheran background, but we went to a Baptist Sunday school. Mom would drop us off, pick us up. Later, we went to a different one where we caught the bus, and we got pulled from that church because, I don't know, they were kind of legalistic, I guess is what the word would be.
Yeah.
If we didn't show up, we got fined a dime or something, and if we didn't know our memory verse, I mean, it was really,
I guess that's one way you can meet the budget.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't get your stuff done, we're going to fine you, and that way we can help pay off the building.
So that was kind of weird.
That's bad.
We left that church, and then I didn't really. I didn't really hang out with anybody that went to church or anything like that. So I always kind of wanted to know about God. I had enough Baptist upbringing that I was just bound and determined someday to get baptized because I knew that would be the way I would get to heaven.
Yeah.
So that always kind of hung in the back of my mind. When I lived in Mitchell, South Dakota, I started attending a Presbyterian church, and it was kind of a, I don't know, small town little Presbyterian church, and I think I must have mentioned to the pastor that I wanted to get baptized. So he thought he would come and visit me. Did an unannounced visit on a Sunday or a Saturday morning, and let's just say it was awkward.
Let's just say she probably was doing some things the night before she shouldn't have been.
Or even that morning. It was just awkward. And I will never make an unannounced home visit. But anyway, when I went in to talk to him, about getting baptized, he just, in certain words said, no.
Yeah.
You don't live a life worthy of that. And he just kind of sent me on my way, never told me about Jesus. And I remember, leaving there. I cried when I left there because, I just felt, I don't know, worthless or whatever. Yeah. And then, long story, but I had another kind of weird run-in with another Presbyterian minister, actually. But, and I really pretty much vowed after that I was going to have nothing to do with the church. Was going to have nothing to do with preachers. I was done. So,
so if you're on the other side tonight and you're going, why in the world would I ever go to church? Because they're a bunch of because look how they treated her.
Yeah.
She changed. She wanted to be baptized, and they said, well, you're not good enough. Well, our Wesleyan theology would suggest that it really isn't about how good we are.
Yeah.
Huh? Right?
Yeah.
And it really emphasizes upon what God's doing anyways. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But, so people are not going to church for so many of these reasons, and a couple, at least two that I'm aware of, and probably more bad experiences you had with those who were shepherds of the flock. Yeah.
Yep.
And so your vow, if you were to make a vow, your vow was, I'm never going there again.
Yep.
Nope.
I was happy to do my thing, and I pretty much set out to just figure out life on my own.
Yep.
Figure out how to find worth on my own, how to fix myself on my own. Didn't always work so good.
Yeah. So what age roughly would you have been during those years?
That would have been like my early to mid 20s.
Early to mid 20s, very key time in life.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're found not to have any worth.
No.
And when people are that way, they go to about anything to find worth.
No. I did a lot, I drank, I smoked a lot of pot, did all those types of things just to try to, I don't know, numb it or, figure it out or whatever. Or
I think what you
hide.
said, to numb it or to hide.
Yeah.
Alcohol, pot, whatever. And so that then becomes, that begins to consume you. So now, are you in Wichita at that time?
I moved to Wichita in, like I said, 84. And I started this job, and it was a good job at Direct Mail. And I was only part-time, but then as things went forward, I applied myself and, was able to work up to a full-time job there. Did some things. I felt like I was really kind of getting my life together. And I decided to do something worthy of my life, and I became a big sister with Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Okay.
And so because I felt like I was finally at a place where I was, quote, good enough. I still like to drink. I had quit smoking pot. Neil did not like that at all, so, that had to go. But I still drank. I didn't drink near as much as I used to, but, I never went to an AA meeting, but I could probably look back and say I probably had a drinking problem.
Okay.
Because if I sat down to drink, I got drunk.
It wasn't just for the casual drink.
No. So anyway, but I felt like I was becoming a respectful person, and I became this big sister. And I don't know, things are coming together. Neil and I had been married. We got married in '88.
Okay.
So I thought we would have kids and all that, and then I don't know, that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting to be now in my around 30, and I just wasn't whole.
Mm-hmm.
I just wasn't whole. There was a lot of empty spaces still, and for some reason, I got this urge to go to church.
Whoa, which you
And
never
I'm
were going to do
I
again.
didn't want to go to church, and I remember I had this gal that was working with us at the time, and she says, well, just go to a Methodist church. You can do anything you want. Because you didn't want to go to church and have to quit drinking or having fun,
do whatever you want.
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah,
and
come
I'm
on
like,
board.
Well, that's interesting,
Yeah.
And it just happened to be that Neil and I had gotten married at Asbury.
Okay. Right here.
Right here. Because...
Who did the wedding?
Jerry Vogt.
Jerry Vogt. Okay, many of you on the other side would remember Jerry Vogt.
Okay, and we picked this church because Neil used to live down here on Custer, and he thought it was pretty.
Okay, there you go. That's the reason why you get married here.
So we came here, and we visited with Jerry. We got married on July 16, 1988. And then shortly after that, we moved just down here on High Street.
Okay, yeah.
So, like 15th and High.
So you're close by.
So I'm close by. So, I'm like, well, maybe I'll go to church. Yeah, right. Nah, there's better things to do, okay? And I remember, so then one Sunday, I said, I'm going to go to church. I'm going to go to that church we got married in. You know, why not?
It's a pretty church.
Yep. I got up. Went back to bed. 2 weeks later, thought, well, I should try this again. Got up, got dressed, went back to bed.
Well, you're 2 for 2. Yeah.
So then the next week I finally came. And I sat at the very back, snuck out, before they said, God bless you or whatever. And Tom Smith was pastor at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
And I did that for a couple months. I would just come in. I would leave before anybody would talk to me. And then one day I marked that I was a visitor.
Uh-oh. Target.
And shortly after I got home, the doorbell rings. And Dorothy Brimmer, and some of you know Dorothy Brimmer. She probably passed before you
before
came
me,
here.
but of the name.
But Dorothy Brimmer showed up at my doorstep with a loaf of bread.
Nice.
And a smile, and oh my gosh, that lady, she's the saintliest woman I've ever met. Anyway, so we talked, and so now I knew somebody here, so that was kind of weird. Well, then I think I had also marked my card that I would like to get baptized.
Okay.
So I had an appointment to come in and talk with Pastor Tom Smith.
Okay.
And I remember and it was a Saturday morning, and I was stewed the whole morning, and Neil wasn't coming to church with me. It was my journey, and I just stewed about this because the last thing I wanted to do was go talk to the preacher. Seriously.
Because your track record with the preachers had not been good.
Not been good.
Yep.
And Neil just looked at me and says, you know what? He's just a man. He puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. And I'm like, okay. Now, so I'm going to backtrack just a second here. Well, no, I'll go for it. Tom asked me, do you have a relationship with God?
Uh-huh.
Well, I'd been sneaking in the back door here, for about 3 months, and I'd been talking to God. And I said, yeah, I do. And here's what my relationship with God was. I was making a deal with God.
Sure.
Okay? And my deal that I was making with God was, I was 31 years old. I wasn't getting pregnant. I wasn't having children. It was a big wound for me.
Sure.
And my deal with God was, I will give you my life if you give me a baby.
Okay.
Okay? Well, suffice it to say, I kept my end of the deal. But that was my deal. And so I'd been talking with God about this. And so I just figured that meant I had a relationship with God. Okay? So Tom and I, we talked about getting baptized and what that meant, and very nice man.
Yes.
And I went home, came back to church the next morning, and it was February 17th, 1991, and I have no idea what he preached on, but I knew when he did the altar call that I had unfinished business.
Okay.
And I walked up here to, well, I don't know, it's gone now, but there used to be an altar rail right here, and I knelt down, and Tom walks up to me, and he's like, Cathy, what's going on? You know, like, because we'd already had this big conversation the day before, and I just said, I don't know, I just guess need to make sure it's all right. Yeah. And so he led me in prayer, and I can tell you, I got up from that altar, and I walked back down that aisle, and I totally was a different person.
Yeah. Totally.
I felt it right off the bat. Probably the next day, maybe the day after, I'm here in Tom's office. What do I do now?
Yep. Yep.
And so the joke is that, you know, I tried out for choir, and they wouldn't take me, so I ended up in the youth group. But
I tell you what, who's running the camera up there right now? Oh, hey, Nathan, from this camera over here, shoot it over there behind Cathy, behind her shoulder that way, because that's where she knelt, and that's where she got saved. Can you make that switch? Yeah.
Yep, there you go. Yep, yeah. Right there.
And so, you know, she and I talked about markers beforehand, and so here's a marker in her life where she knelt, and a change in her life where even when she still walks in this building, like even tonight, she'll say, right over there is where I went.
Yep.
And so thank you for doing that.
Thank
I mean,
you.
it's just a good thing. I mean, visually, even to
It
say,
is.
I knelt right over there in
1991.
1991, and gave my life to Jesus.
Amen.
It was more than just me sitting in the back row and doing my thing and making a deal.
Yep, that's right. It was. And, you know, and I started out working with the youth group. This was in February that I accepted Jesus. Tom had me standing up like maybe the week after Easter to give my testimony.
Oh, there you go. The story.
I was like, I didn't even know what testimony was.
Yeah.
I was shaking like you wouldn't believe my. It was, but I did it. I did it. Okay, and so I don't know. And I think really from that point on, I knew that there was something for me that in vocational ministry. Yeah. But, you know, I had what I thought were a lot of obstacles. I didn't have my college degree, much less any other degree.
Sure.
At that time, Neil had not accepted the Lord. It took about 3 more years before he came to accept Jesus. And so those were challenging years.
Sure.
And he would always look at me, not in a mean way, but he'd say, well, you're just the same old person I married. You haven't changed. I mean, he would say this, you haven't changed. And that would make me so upset because I'm like, really? Gosh, you know, when's the last time you heard me drop the F-bomb, you know, or, you know, something like that, you know? Look what I'm doing now, you know? And he's, well, you're just the same person I married. Yeah. Well, 3 years later or so, was it 3 or 4? Gosh, I can't remember. But I tell you, it was all wrapped up with something that was going on here at Asbury that time. And it was when Ernestine Russell was in the hospital.
Yep.
And almost died.
Yep.
And so Neil had been hearing a lot about all this and some other things that had happened in his life. I think he was just kind of coming to terms with, you know, mortality. Yeah. And I remember the day. I remember these dates because it was my dad's birthday. It was January 22nd. And on a Sunday night, about 10:30 at night, I led my husband to the Lord. And
it's awesome.
That was awesome. And the first thing he said to me was, you have changed. I have seen you grow strong. And so, anyway. Okay, so there was another, you know, there's an obstacle that that had been
Yeah,
taken
and
away.
it's interesting, Stan, you're watching, I know, on the other side, probably Ernestine as well, and bless her heart, she has persevered and several times been in the hospital in the same way like that time, and is with us today, which is just an incredible testimony to what God continues to do in her life and in other lives, and how that's been a miracle, and how it's impacted you. So, yeah.
It's great. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so anyway, but I can say that, even, it just seemed like it always seemed like I was getting caught up in church drama.
Yeah.
Not so good
There's no
sometimes.
church, no drama in church.
And, and I was just like, and then when I felt like God was calling me to ministry, I thought, well, I'll tell you what. I may answer this call to ministry, but it's not going to be the church. It's going to be like, a para-church organization or something like that, because it's not going to be the church.
Yep.
Okay, well, fast forward to about, probably 97, and right up here at that altar, same side. I always went to this side. I came up to this altar and prayed a lot.
Yeah.
Always that side. And Dennis Wallace was pastoring that time, and he came up and prayed, and he said, well, and I said, well, I'm just ready to tell God whatever it is, I'll do it. I don't know what it is that you're asking me to, but I'm surrendering to you this day to go forward with whatever it takes.
Yeah.
It was December, and by 3 weeks later, I was enrolled in probably Butler County to start getting some classes under my belt. I ended up going to Tabor College, their Wichita campus, to do a degree completion. And I started the process to become a pastor. A pastor in the United Methodist Church.
Yep.
And
well, I want to read something because I came across this. Because Michael is working the technology tonight, and we're changing over a new server on our system because it's aged, and so we're trying to get rid of all these emails and all these things that have built up over the years. So I come across in the shared file, which is where tons of stuff is, and I come across this Cathy and Holley, who had put in, it basically looks like a resume, all right? And it talks about a little of her work history and stuff. But then I look at this church history, okay? I look at this church history, which I go, okay, because this is right before, when you're talking about 97, this is prior to. Here's what she has to say. I just came across this yesterday. Didn't even know it existed.
I don't know what it's going to be.
I mean, it's the way God works. So I have been going to Asbury since 1990. I've served the Lord here by working in the youth department, so she's not lying, as a sponsor, serving on the administrative board for 4 years, serving on the evangelism ministry for 3 years, 2 years as the chairperson. I'm a member of the prayer ministry. I taught 5th grade support group in 94 and 95, and I'm on the visitation team. I've worked on the projects of the Weekend of Blessing, the Lenten Devotional, Healing and Wholeness Weekend, Fall Block Party, Easter Egg Evangelism Project, various revivals, and I set up the visitation ministry. So you're toast. So, I mean, okay, so God, you can't say, I haven't been prepared.
No.
So, I mean, here's this list. And now all of a sudden you've done the Tabor College thing, and now you're signed up to begin the pastoral process, the ordination process.
Well, and it was kind of weird because there's always been this thing, and I'm not here to debate this at all, but there's always been this thing about whether women really should preach.
Sure.
And so I had to deal with that, and I actually dealt with that when I was at Butler County and had to write a research paper.
Yeah.
That's what I did my research on.
Yeah.
And anyway,
well, our very own Susan has had to deal with that too.
Yes.
And she wrestled with that.
And I remember the day, and I remember the day that I was kind of struggling with this. And Dennis asked me, he says, well, Cathy, are you called to preach? Now, I had joined I was in the first class of the assistant to the pastors
Right.
that was going on.
Right.
So, I was already kind of exploring that. And you have to know this too, I don't like to speak in public.
Wrong profession.
So not only did I not like preachers, I didn't like to speak in public. And I'm like, I don't know. And I said, and I'm not sure, I guess I don't even know if it's right for women to preach. And he looked at me and he says, if you're called to preach, you preach.
Yeah, right.
I said, oh, okay. And so, so I started this process, and the process was slow moving. The mentor they assigned me didn't have time to be my mentor, and so I had to get another mentor. I had to help the person who was in charge of my paperwork to discern what the credentials, what the requirements actually were and what they meant for me, because I was at this certain age that I probably could have gone different routes,
Yeah.
and it was a struggle all the way, and but I finally got through it, and I started going through all the different things you have to do to go into pastoral relationship with the Methodist Church. I gave my first sermon here, through that assistant to the pastor's thing, and I was shaking. I was so nervous, and I was just like, this is, I can't do this, I was appointed to my first church in July of '99, and I can just say that first Sunday, now I can tell you that was even crowded, that was even surrounded with weird drama, because the day before my first Sunday, I was called by a member of the church to say that your praise team that that had formed under the other pastor has all quit because they won't work under a woman. And I'm like,
It's
oh,
like
okay.
welcome to the new church.
So that just kind of set the pace for a lot. Anyway, but I can tell you that when I stepped into that pulpit, it was like the mantle was put on.
Yeah.
And I knew that this was what I was supposed to do. And I was talking earlier today that one of my call scriptures is from Ezekiel, where it's Ezekiel's call, and God says, I'm going to make your forehead like flint.
Like flint.
Like flint. So you can call me stubborn. But that's I'm tenacious, is what I am. But my forehead has been made like flint, and I say that because it's a God thing. Because a lot of these things that I have gone through with the church, the things that I have gone through with the church, in my own flesh, I would have left a long time ago.
Absolutely.
I just would have. But the call on my life was just so strong that I couldn't, there's no walking away from it.
Yeah.
There's just not.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with me. It's everything about the Lord working in my life, the Holy Spirit. Because on my own, I would have said,
Yeah. So that was
a long time ago.
So the first appointment was what year again?
July of '99.
99. Okay.
Yeah.
So in '99, and it was not an easy appointment.
It was not an easy appointment.
No. And we've all had some of those experiences. We've talked about that earlier, Susan and you and I earlier, and what that, how hard that can be when the smile is there, but you turn around and the knife is coming in the back. And that makes it very hard. And so for you to be the forehead of flint, for you to be tenacious, you had to be. And the other part, when I think back to your days, was the fact that we didn't talk about this earlier, but there were a bunch of us that would meet on occasion, mm-hmm. just so that we could survive, or so that we could keep on keeping on and be there for one another, especially in the renewal piece. But that was a difficult time. You know, you mentioned Job earlier.
Yeah, you know, I had been reading. I can't even remember what book it was. I was still at Tabor, and it was a book about Job, and it was talking about the wager, you know, that Satan had with God. You know, yeah, give me one of your give me one of your guys that, you know, and I will bring them down, basically, and who will stand? Who will stand? Who will stand? And I felt I was at a critical point in this appointment, and I mean, if I didn't know what spiritual warfare was before, I was learning firsthand.
Yeah.
And
in the church.
In the church, because God doesn't take me from the church. I'm here, and so, and I cannot even explain some of the things that were going on and the feelings that they were producing in me, but through you know, this, reading this passage and praying on it and some other things that were happening about that same time, I knew that God was asking me to be one who would stand. This church had several pastors that just, you know, like stay there a year, 2 years, a year and a half, you know, and it was like, we can't break this cycle. We can't break this stronghold unless somebody's willing to stand. You know, would you be that person? And heck no. Heck no. I don't want to be this person.
I don't want to be that person. However,
and then I ended up being that person for that time anyway. And I think some of the strongholds were broken, and the church saw some peace, and
yeah.
But God just, you know, He still does. God will not release me from the church.
Yeah.
That I know. Yeah. I had to go to seminary to keep doing what I was doing, and I couldn't. I was pastoring full time. I was married. I didn't see picking up and moving to Kentucky or to Kansas City. I couldn't see even being gone 3 days a week to Kansas City. I went to visit another seminary south of here. It was right after Easter, and there was at least 2 professors. I went with a fellow classmate from Tabor, and there was 2 professors who were denying the resurrection.
Yeah.
And I came home, and I'm like, what am I going to do? Because I am not going to present myself to that darkness.
Right.
I mean, I'm dealing with darkness all the time.
You already have darkness.
I have
you don't
darkness.
need it darker.
I don't need more darkness. And I had looked into Asbury Seminary, and at the time there was like, they had this distance program. You could do 50% online, 50% in person, and it was like, nah, that's still, I still can't do that without really moving. And I remember coming home from that other seminary visit, just feeling I just don't know what I'm going to do. And Bryson Butts was still here as associate at Asbury Church here, and he encouraged me to consider this Asbury Seminary thing. And it was really strange because later that week I got back onto the website, and the provisions had changed.
Oh, yeah.
And it was now you could do 3 quarters online and 1 quarter in person. And Bryson's like, you can do that? You can do that. Yeah. You can do that by going in the summer and in January. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could do that. And so our board of ordained ministry wasn't sure that they wanted to accept that kind of learning. And so I'm like, well, and they weren't going to meet till whenever, and I had enrolled, so I just enrolled.
Yep.
And they did okay it, and I was really the first person in our conference that started that distance learning aspect at Asbury Seminary. And I tell you, that just went pretty smoothly. By the time I graduated, it took me, what did I, seven years to get through part-time. But when I got through, I had everything just lined up. I didn't have to wait a semester and, go get one spare class or anything. It just all came out.
Well, it was an interesting thing, because I remember back when you were going through all those years, and in my mind, I'm going, oh my gosh, how are you doing this?
10 years of school.
Yeah, how are you doing this long, especially the seminary piece where it's just part-time, and oh my gosh, and I'll just, And we, at the time, I guess we were known as Kansans for United Methodist Renewal at the time, which some of you are aware of, but we would give out scholarships. I happened to be, I believe, on the board at that time, and even moved into the presidency of that, but we were able to help you as well as others like you for that duration to help offset some of those costs. And then not only that, then just like I said, be able to form, a group of people who were like-minded, who experienced a lot of this junk that was going on, and trying to be there for one another. And we would have the banquets, we'd have prayer meetings, we'd have those times. Many times you and I have been a part of these, over the years.
And those scholarships, here was the deal, because I was only going to school part-time, because that's all they would let you take, distance learning at that point. I didn't qualify for most scholarships, academic scholarships. I would have qualified for them academically, but I wasn't full-time.
Didn't have the hours.
Didn't have the hours. So I'd get a little scholarship here, and a little scholarship here, and a little scholarship here. The Home Builder Sunday School class sent me $50 a month, and I put it away into an account, and it bought all my books. And here's the deal. I always say I don't understand God's math. I mean, I don't understand human math. I really don't understand God's math. But I got through seminary. Now, I had a student loan. I was in debt for my undergraduate, okay? I got through seminary without ever getting an academic scholarship with and my church at the time actually, had a fund that they paid into the seminary each year too. But I actually got through seminary owing nothing.
Yeah, that's
and had enough money left over to buy a laptop.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. It's just amazing.
I don't even know how that happened.
Yeah.
And like I said, that the home builders class, paid for all my books those 7 years, and I mean, it was just kind of amazing.
Yeah. Well, so here now you graduate seminary, you get to a point to where there's a reappointment to a new place, which was actually a combination of a couple churches that had closed, which make up what we're calling New Covenant now. But you might talk about that for a minute, because I don't want us to run out of time, so we can cover some of these bases.
Two churches in the West Wichita had decided to close and merge. It was St. Luke and Trinity, and they formed a new church, New Covenant.
Yeah.
Lot of background with that, but they had sold both church buildings. And when I came here in 2007, we were in a little office space over on 2nd and West Street. And we had this piece of land over on Maple across from Lawrence Elementary. And I remember the first day of my time at New Covenant, I went over to the land. And I just didn't know what to do, because the weeds were this high, and I'm like, I was just like speechless. I was just like, I don't know what to do with this.
Here's the promised land.
And we really, in the space we had, we really didn't have a lot of space to do anything. And it was a full-time appointment, even though when I first got there was only about 20 people left out of the two churches because, church merges and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I just started off just looking for a piece of property to rent, another piece of property to rent. And I ended up finding this place over on Douglas in the Delano district. And we moved into that building. We rented it out. We moved in. We fixed it up somewhat, and we moved into it on Easter Sunday, 2008.
Yeah. Yep.
And we rented that for until 2014, I guess. So, but in the meantime, we had been classified as a new church start. So we had grant money that was given to us, and we ran out in 2010, and things tanked pretty fast. And so we ended up telling the DS that we needed something else, that the church couldn't afford to pay me full time anymore. And so it was like 2 weeks before annual conference, and there wasn't a whole lot left, but Norwich was open. And it was like, well, where's Norwich? How far away is that? And realizing that that's probably doable. And so we split the appointment between New Covenant and Norwich. And so I'm on my 14th year at New Covenant and my 11th year at Norwich.
Yeah, and
so
I remember at annual conference, I believe it was
years.
annual conference or right before, and you came up to me and said, hey, I need to talk to you. And they're wanting me to go ahead and go to Norwich. What do you think of that? Well, it was, I'm not sure I knew where Norwich was either, to be honest with you, maybe. But anyway, so you've been there some time there, and so what you have is a tale of two cities there in a way, because they're two different, it's really different as far as a little rural church, and then you have the Delano district, homeless, and all that goes on there. And you talk about, there's plenty ministry at either one, but especially at the Delano, there's a ton of ministry. It's just that you're caught with this financial piece that we've been dealing with.
And then the ministry is so different.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I feel a little schizophrenic sometimes, driving up the highway. But the Norwich people are great people. It's a great church, and it's been a good fit. New Covenant at the time then was, okay, so this is going to help. But for the next year or so, it was pretty shaky, and that fear immobilized us. And we'd had lots of dreams coming into this new building. We were starting to try to see some of this, start happening. And then when that happened, it was just like, we just froze. Yeah. And finally, I remember I don't know if we were having a leadership retreat or something, but it was just decided, here's the deal. If we go down, we're going to go down with a boom. We're going to go down. We're going to be doing stuff, We're not just going to stay immobile because we're too frightened, or we're not going to stay immobile because we don't have the money. We're going to just start doing kingdom work. And if we close doing that, so be it. Yeah. To God be the glory. Yeah. And so we just kind of forged ahead, and God's math, I don't understand it, and we have stayed open. Our budget is usually by October we're tanking, and we're trying to figure out what's going to happen for the next 3 months. But then this happened. This is part of the story that's just amazing. We'd been in this building and in the West Building, and the landlord approached us about buying this building in the building next door.
Right to the next.
Yeah. And well, how would we do that? How would we do church in two buildings? How would we pay for this? Can we actually afford this? And so we had all those meetings, and the church I'm going to butcher this, the church land people that have to come in and the sale or... Anyway, so what happened in the meantime was we had a stint where we did 6 months of evening worship at New Covenant when we first started the 2-appointment thing. And Mr. Joe Bozick was too traditional to do the Saturday night thing. He weathered everything else we'd done so far, but the Saturday night thing was a little too much, and he moved his membership to a different church. But he says, you know what, I want to make sure that you guys get into your building. At this time, he was still hoping we were going to be able to build on that maple land, which by that time we were getting ready to sell. Anyway, but so we knew that he was leaving us in his, in his will, so to speak. So, but I never knew what that was going to be. And then we received notification that he had died, and we knew something was in the mix. Well, we start meeting with the realtor and all these different committees that we have to go through, and we decide that we're going to put out an offer for this piece of property. We signed on the dotted line. We had 90 days due diligence, and in that 90 days, I could have even stopped it, because if I didn't sign off on it as pastor, it could have stopped, or the DS, or I can't remember who else had to sign off on it. Within a week, we got the letter from the lawyer, Joe's estate. And I'm reading it, and I'm like, numbers. Okay, when I look at numbers, I just kind of go. So I'm reading it through, and I'm just like, I'm not sure what this all says. Finally, it dawns on me that I am looking at the right number.
Yeah.
And this man left us in his estate $278,000.
That's amazing.
And that
278.
8,000. Yeah.
Thousand.
And with a little bit of money that we had in a restricted building fund, we were able to pay cash for that piece of property.
Yeah.
Now, we took out a mortgage because the one building on the east, we had to totally renovate.
Right.
So we do have a mortgage, but we this little church that almost died a few years earlier paid cash for this piece of property. And it's a non-traditional property. Yeah. It doesn't look like a church, really.
It's storefront,
it's
if
a
you will,
storefront.
on Douglas, north side of the street.
And when we first did this, we decided that we were going to renovate this part of our property, the east building. It was actually 2 stores that we opened up, and that the building that we had been doing church in, we were going to rent out, so to pay for the mortgage. And still, we were thinking about how we were going to do that. And then another one of these meetings where we're all together, it was kind of like, maybe you shouldn't be so quick to rent this out, because maybe you could use this space for kingdom work. Yeah. And maybe you should just trust, God saying to us, maybe you should just trust me to make this happen. And so we did. Yeah. And so we didn't rent it out. And long story short, it is now what we call the Life Support Center. Yep. And that is where we do the ministry, the outreach ministry that we do out of the Life Support Center. Our motto is life is messy. We offer life support, and we do that through food, clothing, a job center. We have some other programs that work under that umbrella, but ultimately then we get to build relationship with you and ultimately introduce you to the ultimate life support, Jesus Christ. Yeah. So that's kind of how we look at that.
Yeah, so what they've got, if you've never been there, if you could, sometime if you've never been there, many of you have, but to go down on Douglas on the north side
We're next to the Shamrock Bar.
Yeah, there you go, and so, we're trying to keep it in the spirit of things. But on the east side of where you drive in is where they worship, where the offices are. It's a wonderful little worship center in there. Really is nice. It's set up nicely, has a little bit of a stage, elevated area, and so forth. Then the other side, on the west side, is where they do the family life or the life support center, and that's where those of you who know that we're helping support with the food there, especially this month with the 25 baskets of food for Thanksgiving. Jim and Judy Beebe helping out down there, and others who have helped. The food that comes in there, the distribution of that, the opportunity with some tables. Well, of course, COVID's messed it up a little bit, but to be able to sit down and have conversation with people, clothing, job opportunities if people are looking for jobs and so forth, and volunteers then come in. But we have a vested interest, if you will, not only because Cathy came out of Asbury. I mean, that's a pretty big interest, but also then as a part of this life support and the food piece. And I'm just going to say this right now because I really want Asbury Church to be praying even more about what's it look like, because you have some great needs coming up. We're not going to go into that, but great needs coming up, and they're going to be on some life support, and they're going to need to have some support somewhere. And what's that look like for us possibly? So pray about that. I'd ask you to pray about that.
Thank you. And and we've been trying to weather the COVID stuff. Right now we're doing all of the ministry on the back patio. We have this little patio behind the building, and so until it gets too cold to do that, I guess that's what we'll do. What's our time like?
Well, we got a few more minutes yet. Just
okay.
Go ahead. This is our last one. What are they going to do? Kick us out of here?
Well, one of the things that I really want to share too, though,
yes.
is, and I thought this was really funny because I was watching your brother the other day, and he has a tattoo.
Oh, my son. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, your son.
Yeah. Right.
And he has a tattoo, and how he talked about how he would never get a tattoo. Well, I always thought I would never get a tattoo, and I got a tattoo a couple years ago. So I want to share this tattoo. I want to share it with. Yeah. This with you, and it's a tattoo, and it says Shalom.
Shalom.
And this is my driving theology. It's Shalom, and I borrowed this from Alvin Platinga. Do you know of him?
No, I do now.
Yeah.
Well, I think actually I've heard you share this before.
Okay, so. He's a theologian. Anyway. In his definition of shalom was the way things ought to be.
The way things ought to be.
Okay. And so that just stuck with me. And so my driving force of ministry and who I am and what I do is shalom, the way things ought to be, because right now things aren't the way they ought to be.
Right.
It's
That's right.
chaos.
That's right.
And even though the world is in chaos, and we major in chaos sometimes at New Covenant, but and all the way through things like some of the situations that I was telling you about, there's always this concept of shalom, the way things ought to be, because someday the kingdom is going to be established here on earth. Things are going to be back the way they were in the garden.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Things will be the way they ought to be, the way that God created them to be.
Yeah.
And when I get overwhelmed, when I get discouraged, if I can just remember, now that I've stamped it on my hand, if I can just remember to look at that, and that gives me the hope that, yes, we are battling spiritual forces now. We are, coming up against chaos day after day after day, but someday
there is coming a day.
There is coming a day. Shalom, the way things ought to be. And in the meantime, we're the agents of shalom.
Yeah.
The ambassadors of Christ, the agents of shalom, I kind of intertwine those. We're the agents of shalom, and every time that we can establish shalom in our little corner of the world, then that's something.
Yeah.
We're redeeming that little corner of the world for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And then it grows, and then it grows, and it grows, and it grows.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what we try to do at the Life Support Center, is to bring this concept of shalom to people that are pretty broke, sometimes don't even realize how broke they are,
yeah.
And hopefully be able to get to that point where we're not just giving them food.
Right.
We're actually helping them understand life better,
Yeah.
and to make their life better, and to break some cycles that have kept them oppressed sometimes for many, many years.
Yeah. And one of the things as a teaser, I think, what I'll put out there before you at Asbury Church and anyone else who's going to watch as we move closer to Christmas is we've already been working behind the scenes to try and put something together for something to be shown in December. And it may be shown on Christmas Eve as well, but through the Christmas season, as how God is doing some of this work to bring hope to people. And Wendy and Sarah took some time to go down to New Covenant one day and actually interview a person whose life has been flipped upside down because of the ministry of New Covenant and because of Pastor Cathy Holley and because of her willingness to offer shalom. This is not the way it should be for the way she was living and for her to experience, and maybe not every day get it always right, but to know that Jesus has turned her world upside down. So you're going to be seeing that come December sometime as we get this produced for you. But that's part of the ministry, and that's part of what we want to be with you, to walk alongside you, to be in ministry with you.
And that's another aspect of our ministry, actually, because that's the ministry that we've been doing even longer than some of the homeless ministry we've been doing. And that's the ministry that we have with people in recovery, alcohol and drug rehabilitation. Options, the men's rehab used to be just across the street from us. They've now, in the middle of COVID, they moved. So our ministry is a little, shaky right now with them. But we still have several people that are just real solid with us because they came through that program at Options, and we were able to gain access to go in there and teach Bible studies.
Right.
I would go in there and teach Bible studies. Jesse would go in there and teach Bible study. They would come over to church, and sometimes we lose them. They go away, and sometimes they come back, but we have a couple that have just planted themselves with us, and I mean, it's that is a ministry that is very near and dear to our hearts.
Well, we're going to begin to wrap it up, but one of the things that I recall when I took a little sabbatical here a year and a half ago, whatever it was, maybe pushing 2 years ago in January. And I went and visited because I wanted to go to different churches, and some were Methodist, some were not, just what were big, some were small. But I went to New Covenant that morning, and just to, as a pastor, our tendency can go and we can all of a sudden begin to think critically, like, well, I wouldn't have done it that way or whatever. It was so wonderful for me to just sit back and not even get caught up in that, but to observe what was going on, to observe kind of the in and out of people at times, and I mean, it's just the way it is. There's some that are in, some that are out, some are in the back drinking coffee, and all of a sudden they're gone. But the next thing you know of people who are on their knees at the chair in prayer, speaking about relapses, of times they've messed up, they were on drugs, they thought they were over, and then they fell back, and asking for prayer, opportunities to be baptized. And these people highly respect Cathy Holley, the woman pastor. They highly respect her because she loves them, and her ministry is incredible there. And so everybody has what you call your spot, their sphere of influence. And so your sphere of influence is wonderful. And I affirm that in you. And we all have our sphere of influences. We have that in our local churches. We have that in our workplaces. Today kind of stunk for you. Some kind of the funk. But you're doing a great job. We've had a couple people that we've talked about on the story. Wendy Moeller-Seib was here. She and I and Cathy many times have met down here and prayed and talked about things. Other people join in, if they can. Also, there happens to be another person, you've heard his name before, who was her mentor, Steve Rankin. So hang on to that name. You'll be hearing more about that down the road. But so all of these things where we've been able to be a part of ministry, you coming out of here, all of a sudden I'm here at Asbury. It's just how God works is amazing.
It is amazing.
It's just amazing. So I guess we're going to wrap it up, but if you could leave something with us tonight, what might it be?
You know, it's been a tough year, and I get to, you know, the fleshy part of me just gets to railing sometimes about things. You know, we've vented to each other several times.
We have vented.
And if ever there was chaos, we're seeing it. I mean, I've seen more chaos in the world right now than ever before, and so I guess it's just that whole concept of shalom. You know, shalom means peace. It means peace, but it also means total, like a completeness. It means healing. It means harmony. It's what we need, and someday when Jesus comes back, we will see shalom established firmly. But until then we have to do our best to bring that shalom into our corners. And so I just encourage you to do that in whatever ways you can. You know, maybe it's a kind word, maybe it's loving somebody who's hard to love. Maybe it's just agreeing to disagree with somebody just out of love. I don't know, but we're the body of Christ, and if we can't do this, then I mean, who is? I mean, who is going to do this? And we're called. We're all. Some of us have a call, a vocational, a call of vocation, but we're all called. Yeah. We're all called to do kingdom work. We're all called to be agents of shalom. And so how would that look like for you? Yep. What do you need to be doing to I have to adjust my attitude sometimes to be able to do that. So what would it look like for you to adjust to be that agent of shalom?
Well, we all play a role in the way it ought to be, and we don't want to get in the way of that, and we can get that way. I mean, we can get that way, so we don't want to do that. We don't want to be stumbling blocks in the way that it ought to be. So thank you so much. I want to pray for you, and we're so glad you're here tonight, and then I'll have a closing word with all of you on the other side. But if you'll join me in prayer for Cathy, all right? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for Cathy. We thank you for her ministry. We thank you for you bringing her through some difficult days and even just the struggle of ministry. So often it just seems like, wow, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? And yet you continue to be there, yet you continue to remind her that you are the light of the world, and so that you do illuminate her path, and so we're grateful for that. Yes. We're grateful for the way that you have provided shalom through her ministry, the ministry of New Covenant, the ministry at Norwich, the work that you've done in people's lives, the transformation that has occurred as a result of her obedience to you, of her being willing to stand for you, of her having the forehead of flint, her being tenacious for you. May that continue, God. May you continue to work in her life through the working and the power of your Holy Spirit. So thank you for her witness tonight. Thank you for her story. And thank you that we can be a part of it. Continue to reveal to us how we can even be more a part of it. We give you thanks. We give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Bless your heart. Well, folks, this is week number 8, and this brings this particular part of the series to a close. Don't worry, we have some ideas, all right, about what's coming up. Stay tuned as we move through this next few weeks. We're going to be in the holidays and the various things, so we'll probably be waiting till after the first of the year for some things that are similar to this. However, there's some other things we have in mind, so just know that. We're going to be looking at ways that we can still be ministering in the name of Jesus. We thank you all so very much. I don't know if there were any questions. Okay. Appreciate Sarah. Thank you for monitoring tonight. And for those of you who've been watching on Facebook or any other type of social media, we're very grateful for that. And we're grateful for even 2 or 3 that snuck in to support Cathy from downtown. So bless your hearts for doing that, and we're grateful for that. So thank you to all of you. Have a great evening, and we will see you in a variety of ways in these next weeks on the other side of the screen. Don't forget, it really is all about the story. Have a great night.